It's who you are. It's who you are.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this revival chat. We got Banning Liebscher on with us, the pastor of Jesus Culture Church in Sacramento, California, and obviously the director of Jesus Culture Music and that whole movement. Excited to have Banning with us. Banning and I go back to Bethel Redding. We were on staff there together for a long time, and Banning was on the senior leadership team there for many years before he launched out to do Jesus Culture Sacramento. So welcome, Banning. Thanks for being with us today.
Man, so good to be with you. Honestly, I've been looking forward to spending time with the Bethel Austin crew, hearing such, I'm not just saying this, just hearing such incredible things that are happening. So it's good to be here today. And I always love hanging out with
Come
you,
on.
Joaquin. Always love.
Come on.
Here's my problem now. We're at
Awesome.
home. This is the casual thing. Dogs are wanting to get into my office right now the minute we start. I'm like attached right next to my office is this is my life now. Did anybody think that we would become experts at online interviews and videos while at home? But that's our life.
You just bring your dog in and put it on your lap, just make it real family.
He'll just sitting here. You can see him right there. He's just sitting here the whole time and everything else. So yeah.
Awesome. So I'd love just you launched out, from Bethel Redding, planted Jesus Culture Church in Sacramento. Obviously had the music label going before that, but just fill people in, like how's it going there? What have you guys been up to? Just paint the picture a little bit for maybe people who aren't familiar with what you guys are doing there.
Sure. Well, I mean, just to start, I was on staff at Bethel for 18 years. I think I may have been the first staff member that Bill hired, possibly right after he came. I was actually interning at Bethel, and I was one of the first. You'll enjoy this. I probably am one of a handful of people who were actually born and raised in Redding. So I am from Redding. That is where I was born and raised, and so
there's not a lot of them around Bethel. You are one of the few.
I remember asking on a Sunday service one time, like a Sunday night I was preaching, I said, how many of you guys were actually born and raised? And like one person. It was me and one other guy that raised and said we were. But so I was on staff there for 18 years, did youth ministry for 12 of those, and then a variety of other things. And then I guess 7 years ago, I mean, this is how crazy that is. 7 years ago, we launched out and were sent to go plant a church like you guys down here in the Sacramento area. And it's been amazing. I mean, you would know this. Local church and senior pastoring is so different than just itinerant or conference ministry. And so, and I knew that. I'd youth pastored, but senior pastoring is just different. And so I definitely came down sober. I definitely came down knowing God had called us to do this. I knew God was in it. But definitely like, all right, do I have what it takes to be a senior pastor? And I got to tell you, man, the last 6 years, last 5.5 years of the church, it's been the most fulfilling, rewarding years of my life. I love it. I love what God's doing in our community. I love how he's changing lives and the people that have come and the depth of connection and the salvation. I just love all of it. So it's been a really incredible few years, and we were able to come with a great team. We came with a whole team of Jesus Culture and 7 famous worship leaders and everything else. But it's been really enjoyable, really, really rewarding.
Awesome. And you guys are prepping to move into a new building, your own facility. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, what was happened was I'll have to tell you a story sometime or today, whatever. But we've been looking for a building, but couldn't quite. Where we're at in Folsom, nothing's available because it's not really a depressed area. Like there's no warehouses available with parking. And so we've been looking, couldn't really find anything. And then Chris Valentin actually called, said there's a building coming. I just had a vision. And sure enough, a month later, the building wasn't even for sale, but we approached it. Anyways, we go out to this building. We have 5 months though to raise. We'd raised some money already, but we had 5 months to raise another 2 million, 2.5 million, something to get it. And I mean, we raised the money just in time to close in the deal, and then the global pandemic hit. So we have a building. We have a building, and
Praise
we've been able to
God.
use the parking lot. We've been able to use the parking lot for Mother's Day drive-through. And we're gonna have a
Oh
Father's Day
man.
drive-through as well. And but we still have money we actually won't be able to move in until we renovate it, and that actually is going to require some more fundraising. Phase one was just trying to get the down payment to buy the building. So, but we have a building now.
Sure,
We have a
sure.
building. I don't know when we'll move into it, but it's there. It's sitting there.
Yeah. Come on. Well, that's great. Congratulations on the building. That's
Thank
awesome,
you.
man. It's such an adjustment for everyone this pandemic, and yep, making use of the parking lot. Way to go! I
Well,
love it.
you tell
I hadn't
they
heard
just
the Chris Valentin the word that he called you a month beforehand. That's amazing. I love that.
yeah. Well, what had happened was that we were actually thinking, should we could not find a building. It was like either it wasn't zoned right, either it didn't work out when we pursued it, or it was just an office building that had no parking, whatever it was. So we finally just said, are we supposed to get land? Like, I don't really want to get land. Building's another ballgame. Rather than taking a building and renovating it compared to building, different ballgame. So we were looking at the 6 acres and thought, are we supposed to buy this? And we were right in the process of trying to figure that out. And Chris, man, just as only Chris does, he texted me and said, I'm in Brazil or somewhere, and I've been praying for you the last 2 hours. And the Lord just showed me a vision of a building, and a building's coming. So I said, okay. So about a month later, this building kind of popped up. It wasn't for sale, but we approached the owner and said, would you be interested? And he said, yeah. So I called Chris. This is Chris. I said, hey, Chris, we had to decide, do we walk away from this land and pursue this building? Even though we weren't sure if we'd get the building, but we have to walk away from the land in order to do it. And I said, Chris, what do you think? He goes, of course you have to go after the building. I had the prophetic word for you. He's like, of course you go after the building. Do you not remember the word I gave you a month ago? I'm like, well, yeah, that's why I'm calling, Chris. I mean, I'm calling to ask, but yeah. So Chris was just like, why would you even think that you wouldn't go after the building? I gave you a word about a building. So yes. And it ends up, he was right. He was correct.
But I love that story about Chris Banning, and I just love his influence, and having a prophetic father like that in our lives is so awesome. So you
So
know you know you just talked about launching down there in Sacramento 7 years ago, and you guys have been such an encouragement to us, and you personally have been such a coach to us, and it's been really cool having you, 3-4 years ahead of things for us, and as we're exploring everything, heading into everything, you've been able to give us so much advice. But I was just thinking about the fact you're talking about all your years at Bethel, and you actually were the head of second year school of ministry for my class. I was in your class, the second year school of ministry. So you have been a mentor for my life for years now, Manny.
I got to
good
tell
good
you,
times, good memories.
we keep talking about Chris, but I look back right now, and Chris definitely kind of saw potential in me. But I was 25 years old when he came to me and said, I want you to take over second year. I want you to youth pastor, and I want you to also run second year. I was 25. And there was 40 students in the class. It's not like it is now, right? There was 40 students. And I look back now, I'm like, what did I have? I had nothing to say at 25 at all, like nothing to say at 25, but somehow Chris put me in charge. And so, yes, you were the best
Yeah.
pupil we ever had, Joaquin. You by far the best student ever to come out of my 4 years of second year.
Uh, I didn't pay him to say that, ladies and gentlemen.
It's
But I
just the
do
truth.
I do have
It's just the
I
truth.
do have
Truth is the truth.
uh, well, thank you. Come on, I love it. I do have a serious question though. You mentioned already being on the staff. I think with 18 years, being on the senior team. All that influence. Uh, you know, what would if you could sum up some of your biggest takeaways from all your years at Bethel Reading, and what it shaped, your leadership, like, how you do ministry and run your church. What are some of the biggest takeaways from your time in Reading?
Yeah, well, I think that people would obviously know from the outside because Bethel is such a forerunner in this that the supernatural, the kingdom, honor, the prophetic, these are all things that obviously are in our DNA because of my time at Bethel. But when I look back at my time at Bethel, probably the two things that stand out the most that I feel God shaped me deeply with, one is this is just the ability to stick in community. So the
Mm.
covenantal nature of Bethel, and when things got hard, when it was bumpy, it's just family. You're there with family, and really having to be shaped and formed and molded in covenantal relationships with one another. When it got hard, it wasn't on the table to leave type stuff. So when I look back, I think God used the community part to shape and
Yeah.
mold and form me. I would not be who I am without and I'm talking about people that believed in me deeply and covered me, and people that had a problem and dynamics that were hard. It was this. So it was the supernatural, it was signs and wonders, it was honor, but for me it was this deep thing of like, I am deeply embedded in community and we're just going to figure it out. And then the second thing for
So
me is
good.
probably Bill. Obviously, Bill. I remember I went to 1 year of college, and I loved college. Loved college. Was going to get a pastoral degree, and then I got hired by Bethel, so I never went back. And I remember asking the Lord. I said, Why didn't you have me finish college? I really loved college. Why didn't you have me finish college?" And God just spoke to me and said, "You needed Bill more than you needed college." And I think that it was true for me. Bill, my need for significance, my driven nature, my wanting to influence whatever else. Bill is just the most understated. Like, he's passionate about serving Jesus, but he's not ambitious in the way that we would define ambition.
Yeah.
He doesn't, like, when he says, "I want to be known in heaven and I want to be known in hell. I don't care if I'm known on the earth." That's not just like a cute saying. Like, he means that. And I think for me, it's what I needed in order to
Right.
finish this race well. Is I needed somebody who was there that I saw. They didn't care about how many showed up. They didn't care if people were writing about them. They didn't care about all of that stuff. And I remember being with Bill. Bill never even advertised anything. Bethel Sanctuary, if people have never been there, holds 900 people. It's not big.
Yeah.
Like, the sanctuary is not big.
Yeah.
It holds 900 people. We would sell conferences out months, like three, maybe I don't know about 4, but 3 months in advance, the conference would sell out. And I'm like, come, like, let's move, like, let's go to the convention center. It holds 2,300 people or whatever. And Bill's like, "I just really like our sanctuary. I just love that I just love the presence of God in our sanctuary." Like, he just didn't care about what normal ambition kind of cares about. And it was so good for me. I
Wow.
learned that success is faithfulness and obedience because of Bill. That's it. There's no other
Wow.
definition of success. It's faithfulness and obedience. It's doing your assignment well. So
Yeah.
as I transitioned out of Bethel, deeply, deeply shaped by the covenantal community in that place, and then deeply, deeply shaped by how Bill approaches ministry. And I honestly, I I would be hurting people, and I would be a mess if I hadn't been with Bill and seen a man who just wants to be faithful above all else and doesn't care about anything else. And so,
Right.
and lives for eternity. So I think that those two things for me shaped me pretty deeply.
Yeah. So profound. Yeah. Bill has marked so many lives, and I love what you were saying about being deeply rooted in community, and you can see that message obviously played out in your the congregation that you're growing and building. But I think I've mentioned this to you before, but in our pre-launch year, um, every time we'd have a new group come through, we would play your message on church as a family, not a business. and that that
Yeah,
that
yeah,
that deep message in there about being grounded in community. But that really was part of shaping our pre-launch year, and I love that message. I love your heart for that, and just
that's
hearing about
rad.
where it came from Bill and that time. It's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
You
It's
know,
completely. I mean, Bill would talk about the kingdom as a family. He's framing it in family terms for us, and when you get that, it
yeah,
changes things. And that's all Bill.
I love it. You know, I've watched over the years, going way back to my early years in Reading, and you already were doing, Jesus culture was starting to take off, and you were doing the youth conferences, but they were relatively smaller regional events, and that and then growing that to becoming this movement, and then ended up doing, the Chicago, arena, and now you're doing Jesus Culture Church, and that's exploding. I've watched you steward in faithfulness and grow with your vision, your faith with the vision, and from the little things and watching that grow in the big things. Can you just talk into that for people what it looks like to grow vision and faithfulness?
Yeah, it's interesting because you can kind of look back and tell stories in romantic form. Your memory is a little more romantic sometimes than it was at the time.
Right.
But I think at the end of the day, we just had a deep passion to follow Jesus. I just wanted to do what he was telling us to do. And 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 I think when I look back even on some stuff, I think we just believed God. We would
Yeah.
feel like the Lord was talking to us and we just believed him and just started going for it. And especially in those early days, you don't even know what it's costing you. You're just like, yes, let's do it. And you have no idea the cost involved to your yes. As you get older, you understand the cost a little bit more. But I think just that heart that just says, Jesus, I just want to follow you. I want to do what you're doing. If that's pastoring a church, then let's do it. If that's putting on an arena gathering, let's do it. If that's doing a music label, let's do it. And but just a deep desire to. And I think for us, again, this sounds so romantic, but Pete Gregg years ago said a phrase kind of like this, and it stuck with me. But I just want to get together with some friends and change the world. And it's kind of stuck with me that I'm like, I just want to get together with some people we love and just dream about changing the world together and then going for it. And
Come
what does
on.
that look like? I don't know. And is it guaranteed to be successful? I don't know. But I don't want to get to the end of my life. This is what I realized. I don't want to get to the end of my life and realize I didn't do anything that required faith. I didn't really do anything that required faith. I didn't step out in areas that maybe weren't going to be successful or weren't going to succeed. I only did things when money was guaranteed, people were guaranteed, success was guaranteed. That's the only time I did things. So I think if we can live with that sense of, I, don't- I don't want to live. I don't want to get to the end of my life and realize I never did anything that required trusting God or required faith. But this is one of those things. We all love sermons about trusting God. We when the preacher's preaching about faith, we're all like, "Amen, come on, so good. I'm going to get a tattoo about that." We love sermons about trust. We just hate being put in positions where trust is required. And that's the crazy part. The journey of following Jesus requires faith. And we're like, yes, until I'm in a spot where faith is required. Like, listen, when you have to trust God, it's because something's happening. You're going like, okay, God, I trust that you're going to come through because I need you to come through. I trust that you're not going to leave me because if you leave me, this isn't going to work out well. And so I think that just keeping that consistently, like I want to take risks, I want to move, I want to go after what God's called me to do. You end up where you end up, and this is where we've ended up.
So good. I love it. I love it. So fun. You 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 hit the community dynamic already, but you guys are 7 years in, and looking back now over 7 years, what are some of the dynamics of as you're forming a church and you're forming a community, you're watching it take shape? What do you look back and say, man, make sure you get these things right from the beginning.
Yeah, totally. Well, this is what I learned about, and me and you would understand this. And this is not a knock on Bethel Redding at all, but Bethel Redding's a unique place. It's a unique place. It's got 2,300 students that are there for the school, and maybe another what do you think? Another 1,000 attached to them. People have moved
Yeah,
in from all over, so there's a lot of local church that me and you are having to kind of like figure out that maybe we didn't have to figure out when we were in Reading, if
sure.
that makes sense. But so a lot of it is just kind of learning local church. But I think for me, what I realized was this: is that building the local church is not home run based. So when I'm an itinerant or when I'm doing conference ministry, it's home run based. I mean, I'm bringing the best that I got. I'm bringing the best points, best stories, best moments, and I'm swinging for the fences. But when
Yeah,
you build church, church is building culture and community. So right now, and even in the stage you're in right now, the foundation of Bethel Austin is going to be culture and community. Those two things are what we're having to build. But culture and community are not built on home runs. They're built off of consistent base hits. So if you
yeah,
understand the baseball analogy, it's you got to it's that you got to hit a lot of base hits. You got to hit a lot of singles, and not just you, but you got to get other people to hit base hits. So culture and community, the two things that God's trying to form right now in this season in Bethel Austin, those two things are both built not off of home runs. And I found this 2 years into our church plant. I looked up one day at the score. I'm like, wow, we've scored 10 runs and I have yet to hit a home run.
yeah,
Like Sundays, and look, I'm not trying to downplay what we do, but like that Sunday, there are some Sundays I get up, I'm like, that was an infield single. It was an infield single, but I made it. But it's
yeah,
not just me hitting, but then that thing that they did and that person they did, and that was a single, and that was a single, and that leadership gathering we did this week, and that small group thing we did this week. And when all of those things are combined, all of a sudden you begin to see movement and momentum. And then culture is really built off of getting a whole bunch of people to head in the same direction. And
yeah,
that's not built off home runs either. That's just a lot of consistency. And so the illustration we use about culture um, I don't know if you call them doughboy pools, but you know those above ground pools.
yeah.
I had a
Mm-hmm.
friend across the street when I was growing up. I would have been in fourth grade or whatever. A friend had one across the street, and we'd go over, and it came up to about here on me, and we'd be playing around. All of a sudden, somebody'd say, "Let's do a whirlpool," and us four kids would just start going in the circle. We just would start going. And all of a
Same
sudden, the
direction. Yeah,
more that the more that we were going the same direction together, all of a sudden that water just started picking up until all of a sudden we didn't even have to go. The water was picking us up. That's culture's that. You're trying to establish culture until it becomes so set that it's so established that it just starts its own momentum. But in order to get that, you got to get a lot of people going the same direction. And they
yeah,
can't be going opposite directions. They can't be headed that way when you're going that way and that way. And so my point with that is culture. So when I look back, I'm saying, oh man, even Bethel Austin, where you're at right now, you're building culture, you're building community. Get a ton of people being consistent about the same direction. We just get a
yeah,
ton of people being consistent about the same direction. And then you look up and realize, wow, we scored 10 runs. That's amazing. And I'm not sure one of my sermons has been a home run. They've all been solid. Sometimes they're a double. Sometimes it's a double. But
right,
it's just consistently
right.
bringing what you bring. But then I would say this for everybody watching: it's not just Joaquin or Renee who are having to hit singles. It's a whole group of people that are hitting singles that really establishes church at a deep level.
Yeah, so good, Ben, and I love that. It's funny you talking about home runs, and I totally get what you're saying, but I have heard you preach a lot of home runs, and you're one of my favorite preachers. And it is a funny thought, but you bring in all these great stories when you preach, like funny stuff that like really happened in your life. And I heard somebody say once that you actually have a file of funny
Yeah.
stories that you could refer to when you, is that true? You got like
Yeah.
an archive of
Well,
funny stories?
yeah, I grew up at the youth pastor used a lot of stories. So when I
Yeah.
was in youth group, the youth pastor, and then when Dan Fairley became a mentor in my life, Dan Fairley was the early days for me shaping my preaching. He was the one that would listen to my
Yeah.
preaching and then give me feedback. And his point was always text of life, text of scripture. So text of scripture, and then you attach text of life to it.
Yeah.
So what would happen, and my personality is naturally a storyteller and trying to be funny. So what would happen? So what I do right now, I could show you on my phone. I like on my phone, on my notes section, I just have something called illustrations, and I will write down stories. So we'll be in a conversation with somebody, and a story from when I was in high school popped up. This just happened yesterday, but I forget what the story was. Um, um, so a story will pop up, and I'll just go write it down. I'll just go write it down because I'm like, I don't even know what I would ever use it for, but I write it down. And then when I'm preparing my sermon, I'll preach, I'll get my sermon together, and then I'm like, I wonder what points would illustrate that. And I'll just go through all the stories that I've written down over the last however many
Yeah.
years, just because I told a random
Yeah.
story. Uh, uh, and it's in conversations or something will happen. I haven't even
Yeah.
used a story yet, but there's a story of my daughter who turned 16 years old, and we had a bunch of her friends over, and some people crashed the party with alcohol, and then some of her friends stormed outside and yelled at some people that drove off. I don't even know what I've ever told. I don't even know what I would even use a story for, but I've written it down. And so there are times, there's a story I tell about the cat in the U-Haul. I don't know if anybody's heard me tell this cat in the U-Haul story where this cat peed all over me and this whole thing. I had that story sitting in that file forever. I had no idea how I'd ever tie it in. But one day I was going through and I was talking about how sometimes life is just overwhelming and messy. And then I went through and I'm like, oh my gosh, just like that story. So that's how it works. That yes, I do have a file on my phone of stories that I either remembered because I was telling conversations or something that's happened to me.
I was actually gonna to mention the cat in the box in the U-Haul is one that I remember.
Yes.
It stands out. There's so many. The window that blew out in your old car
Yeah.
going down the
Tell it.
highway. Oh my goodness, I could go on. I encourage people, if you haven't heard Banning preach much, get on the podcast, get on they stream services. It's great. You'll get a lot from it, and you'll get a good laugh along the way. But those stories, they do stick in there, and they do help people remember. I mean, I remember those stories from years ago, so
Yeah.
that's good stuff.
That's
Hey,
funny.
you got so many things going on in your world, the church and the music label, and still traveling, and you got so many things. How do you balance your ministry world and your family life, and what have you learned about doing that along the way?
Yeah, man, great question. I would say a few things. I think that if you're in the right timing of the Lord, there's grace for what you're doing. But I would encourage anybody. Um, I can just tell you for me, not everybody is in the same ministry type setting that I am, but if you're really going to do what God's called you to do, at the end of the day, you're going to have to know how to develop and raise up teams. And so for me, there's a lot going on, but we just have a phenomenal team. I'm not just saying that. I mean, they're amazing. So I don't feel like I'm carrying the weight or the load alone. I don't feel like I have to be at everything. I don't feel like I have to be the guy with all the ideas. I think we have a really amazing team. So it's one of the things I would encourage leaders to do is no, you're not going to be able to do what you're called to do apart from people coming alongside and running with you. And so part of how I balance family life and ministry is make sure that we have a great team. And if we have a great team, then it's not hard to pull away and be with family and make them top priority and not feel like I have to do or be at everything. So that's probably one of them. And I think the other thing is just flat out priorities. At the end of the day, I think we had a real realization that there's a lot of stuff in my heart that we're not doing right now. I actually was feeling like the Lord was talking to me today about some things won't happen until my son graduates high school in 4 years.
Yeah.
And so, because it's just the priority right now. The thought of, doing some big things for God and then not being connected to my kid's heart when they're 18, I just like, I don't know what version of success that is, but it's horrible. So I think for me, it's just I think it's understanding the right definition of success. And then I think it's honestly, if you're going to do a lot of stuff, you better be good at leading teams because you're not going to do it on your own.
Yeah. So good. I love that. I think, I've watched you model that well. I think that's something that I've really gleaned, from Reading and the team there, and they really value that and have modeled that well. And I really appreciate that. Our kids are young on our end, but we want to say that we did that well at the end for sure. So,
Yes.
and it's
Yes.
kingdom, kingdom looks like family, so it's super super
Yeah.
important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Um.
And I'll just tell you this, we've set this up like right now, for our church, and you're in the same boat. You can build whatever culture you want right now. But my daughter, who she doesn't play soccer anymore, she just ended. But my 17-year-old has been playing travel soccer for years, and she would have games Sunday. And I wouldn't be able to go to them Sunday morning, but CJ, she would be at those games. And, if people are wanting to come to our church and wondering where the pastor's wife is and why isn't she on the front row during the thing, it's like, well, maybe there's another church for you. But like we're going to be out there supporting our daughter who is involved in something. And so you just have to have a value for it and stick with it.
Yeah. It's so good. Somebody on Instagram asked the question. I thought it was a great question. What are you dreaming for next, for both for you individually and for Jesus Culture as a church?
Yeah, great question. I don't know. I'm dreaming the same thing I was dreaming. We just want to see a move of God. I want to see. It's just more the same. Um, it's more the same in that, but it comes in seasons. So Jesus Culture, the church is getting established. We just bought a building. We have to still raise money for it, but we just bought a building. That's a significant milestone. Church is established. I just want to see God move in Sacramento. And then I want to see the church around the world strengthened. We started a school of leadership that we're doing. I want to raise up leaders and flood the earth with them. So I have a real passion to strengthen the local church, to strengthen pastors in the local church. I have a real passion to raise up leaders. We're dreaming about all of that stuff. And to just continually to do what we're doing right now, which is just going after this whole region of Sacramento. So I'm dreaming about, and all I would say this as well, there's kind of a 2.0 version of Jesus Culture that I can feel right now. Jesus Culture was like a youth and young adult movement known for its worship. That's what we were for
Yeah.
years, like a youth and young adult
Yeah.
movement that was known for its worship. But the last 7 years has been us transitioning to where we're no longer a youth and young adult movement known for its worship, but we're a church movement. And I'm talking about, we're a church movement that's going to strengthen the body of Christ. And so I feel like the Lord's made the transition with us. He's laid the foundation for this next season, but that we're about to move into a new season. And I'm older too. I mean, that's just flat out some of it. When we started, it was in my early 20s. Now that we're in our 40s, there's just a different level of kind of authority on you to speak to the body of Christ and to speak to leaders and to challenge them. And I want to see church done differently in many ways. I want to see church not redefined. I want to see church redefined in areas like it's a family, not a business. In kind of our philosophy of building mature believers and how we're doing evangelism and how we're reaching cities. So a lot of what we're doing right now, as we begin to get even greater clarity and there's fruit from what we're doing, we'll export that fruit and help other churches kind of just strengthen them.
I love that. A couple more questions. I know we got to let you go soon, but even going back to when you were leading second year and I was a student in there, and And hearing you talk about your personal value for prayer and consistency in that, spending time with the Lord in the mornings, and I know that that's built a foundation really that everything that you're experiencing now, I'm sure, is connected to that. But do you want to just talk to that for a moment, your value for prayer and consistency in that?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think everything is kind of built from the secret place. So, I think the Lord meets us in the secret place. I'm convinced that there are some things you can only get corporately gathering with people, but at the same
Yeah.
time, there are some things that are reserved for those who will separate to the inner room of prayer. And I think it's in the inner room of prayer that God speaks to you, that God reveals things to you, that God shapes and molds you. It's in the inner room of prayer that He reveals what He's doing and your part in it. And so it's in the inner room of prayer that He realigns hearts and readjusts priorities, and we find what we were created for. So, I actually, some of this preaching for you guys soon. Some of this stuff is, I really do feel like there's a season right now where He's inviting us to pull aside. He's inviting us to turn aside. And you got to find what that is for you guys. For me in my 20s, it was, I had one baby. She slept in. So I'd get up at 5 a.m. I'd get to the prayer room and I would just be there for a couple hours. It looks different now for me, because it's just a different season. So for me, before the quarantine, I would drop my son off at school. Like, where's the inner room? Where's your secret place? You got to find where your secret place is. For
Yeah.
me, it was, I would drop my son off at school, and then before I'd go to our school of leadership, which started at 9, I found there's a parking lot that I would go to, and I just go park in the back corner of this parking lot. Was nobody there, and I would just meet with God in my car. I'd take my Bible out, I'd put worship music on, and for me, a secret place was now in a parking lot in the car. Some of you guys, a secret place may be, instead of going to lunch with your coworkers, you take a sack lunch and you go down to a park and you sit on a bench. For some of you, it's taking a walk or grabbing a cup of coffee. Some of you, it's honestly just taking a bath or just being with the Lord at night or in the morning, whatever it is. Like, where is the secret place where God's going to come and meet with you? But prayer is about meeting with God. It's about, I've come to meet with. He wants to meet with you. I mean, this is the crazy part. Jesus, Jesus says, when you pray, go to the inner room because your Father who is in secret is there. I mean, how crazy is that thought, that God's in the secret room waiting for you? You know where God is right now? I don't know where your secret room is. I don't know where the secret place is. I don't know where the inner room is, but wherever that is for you, He's there waiting for you. I had the crazy experience. If anybody's been to Bethel, before Bethel was Bethel, there wasn't as many people there. The prayer house was pretty empty in the morning. So I would show up to it. And, I'd be at my house. I'd wake up early, and I only live like 4 minutes away. And I'd get to the prayer house, and you've been to the prayer house. There's like a set of double doors that open up, and then you walk into a hallway, walk down the hallway, and then you open another set of double doors and walk into this kind of circular prayer room. And I would get up and I'd go and I'd get through the first double doors. I'd walk through the hallway and I'd open the second double doors and I'd walk in. And the minute I walked in, I don't know how to describe it except for this: God was there waiting for me. And I would just be overwhelmed by the fact that God had been in that room waiting for me to come. And it was God at my house. Yeah. Was God in my car? Yeah. Was God in the hallway before I walked into that prayer room? Yeah. But I'm just telling you, when it says, when you go into the inner room, your Father who's in secret is there. God is inviting you to meet with Him. And it's when we turn aside and go that you meet with Him. And so prayer really is about that. Prayer is just turning aside to meet with God. And I would just encourage anybody listening to this right now. It may be a park bench, guys. I'm meeting God in a car in a parking lot right now.
I love that.
Like God,
so real.
Yeah, God's in the corner of a parking lot behind a movie theater, He's waiting for me there. And when I
Right.
go and
Love it.
I pull in, all of a sudden it's like God's been here waiting for me. He wants to meet with me. And so I just think trying to establish that, and I think giving grace for different seasons. I know that I struggled for a long time with prayer looked like one thing. It looked like 5 a.m., a couple hours, and then all of a sudden you have kids, and I started realizing I'm leaving my wife in the morning to take care of everything while I go pray.
Right.
And prayer actually in
Right.
the morning began to feel less spiritual to me because I was leaving my wife to get all the kids ready for school while I was there doing that. And so prayer looks, the secret place and where you're meeting with God or how you're meeting with God looks different in different seasons. I found myself when I have drives, man, I'd be in the, I have a longer drive to work when our offices were further away. And I'd be on the freeway, cars everywhere, and just like crying out to God, like just crying in my car, encountering God in some worship song as I'm driving. Listen, God meets with you in different ways in
Mm.
different seasons, but the heart is God, I want to meet with you.
Yes.
God's been meeting with me when I wake up. When I wake up in the morning or before I sleep at night, I just have a sense that God's been drawing close in that time for me, and so I'm just trying to pay attention to that. I woke up this morning
Woo.
and I'm like, wow, like God's there with me when I wake up right now, and that's kind of it's not that He wasn't before, but there's a newer season, and so I'm just taking time, and He's been speaking to me right now so much as I go to bed and as I wake up. So it's just paying attention to that type of stuff,
Yeah.
and recognizing that God meets with you in different ways at different places in different seasons, and not to get stuck in one way, and to allow yourself to go on a relational, And I remember Todd Bentley years ago used this. He talked about how he would meet with the Lord in he had a picture of a house, and sometimes he'd be in the basement doing work. Sometimes he'd be in the bedroom and it was more intimacy. Sometimes he'd be in the living room just hanging out. Sometimes he'd be in the kitchen. Sometimes he'd be in the bathroom repenting. Like he had this kind of picture. I thought it was such a brilliant picture that sometimes your relationship with the Lord or your time with Him is in the living room, just hanging out. We're just together.
Yeah.
Like God, I'm out there building planter boxes for my wife, and God's just with me in that moment. Other times it's intense moments of in the basement just doing work, or sometimes it's more intimate, sweet moments in the bedroom. It was always just a great picture for me of don't get stuck that your connection with God is one room. There's an entire house. There's an entire house.
Yeah.
And the journey of this life is encountering God in different ways, in different rooms, in different seasons, and you just have to pay attention to that.
I love that. I tell you, you were taking me back to some sweet moments, reminiscing about the prayer chapel at Bethel. I had some good hours in that prayer chapel, and God would be in there waiting for you. And
It's true, isn't
I
it? It's true.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We hit the ground running here in Austin, and just love what we're doing. And so I don't spend a lot of time thinking back and going, oh, I miss this about Reading. But you start talking about the prayer
Yeah.
chapel, and I'm like, oh, I miss the prayer chapel.
Totally.
So
I still have it.
good.
They had a CD, a World Mandate CD, which is a kind of a missions organization. They recorded it. And man, they just had this little like boombox kind of stereo with that world. And I would put that World Mandate. And still, I found that CD on iTunes recently. And oh man, it just brings back these moments when I would just put that worship CD on. It just was walking by
Uh,
myself with the Lord. Oh, so beautiful.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So good. You may have just done it, but I was going to ask you, if people who are listening to us right now, they also can hear you tonight. You're going to be sharing a message for Bethel Austin, but I was just going to ask you to give a little teaser. People listening to this, they can tune in tonight and hear you. What was on your heart that you're going to release for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I just feel like we're just in a turn aside season. We're in a season of invitation, and we just talk. I won't ruin all of it, but the story of Moses when he encounters a burning bush, that the burning bush wasn't actually the encounter, it was simply the invitation. And for those that will respond to the invitation, there's a season of encounter that's waiting, and just kind of just talking through that turn aside season and season of invitation, and what God's
Yeah.
wanting to do and what He's wanting to establish.
So good. I love it. Well, I encourage people to tune in for that as well. I know it's going to be amazing. Um, I've talked about it already, just, the influence that you've had on me over the years, on Renee, you just helping us in the process even of planting and stewarding this church. And but people who want to hear more, glean more, learn more about what you're doing. I know they can go to Jesus Culture website,
Yep.
JesusCulture.com. But I know you guys have a leadership institute you kicked off as well. Like,
Yep.
what are some areas people can go to get to glean more from what you guys are doing?
Yeah, well, we do have a leadership school. We have a Jesus Culture School leadership we just started, and it's going to be actually going online because of all this pandemic. We're going to take 1 year and just do it online,
Yeah.
just because of so many uncertainties. But yeah, I not to sell books, but I would say I have a book called Rooted, and then literally June 2nd, I have another book coming out called The 3 Mile Walk. And a lot of the stuff that we're talking about right now, or a lot of the stuff that would be on my heart, would really be in those two books, Rooted in the 3 Mile Walk,
Yes.
that are coming out. But then JesusCulture.com, we've got podcasts, we've got the whole world, So any of those type
Yeah.
of things, you can find it at JesusCulture.com, though.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah, I'd encourage people to get those books. And I'm looking forward to the new one that's coming out. That's exciting.
Yeah,
Right
thanks,
around the
man.
corner.
Writing is a labor of something, so I'm excited that it's coming out.
I tell you, I'm in the middle. I'm trying to get through that process right now myself. So yeah,
Yeah,
it is a
it
labor of
doesn't come
love.
easy for me. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Banning, thank you so much for the time. Thank you so much for, all that you've sown into us along the way. And obviously, we're doing this virtually because we were going to have you with us in person, and that got thwarted like everything else in this season. But we super are looking forward to having you out with us in person when
I
we
am too.
can. And I know our
I am
community
too.
is going to love that. So awesome. Thanks for the
Yeah.
time. It's amazing always connecting with you.
Thanks so much, Joaquin. I feel the same way.